Hello, everybody. Greetings from Dayton.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Amelia.
And Tom.
And so we're working our way through Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection narrative during Lent and Easter Sunday. I think this is our third installment. I believe we're up to the arrest. Is that correct, Tom?
That's right.
That's what you're planning for today?
That's the one.
Okay. All right. Listen to Tom. Tom's going to thank you, by the way, everybody who gave us some feedback about whether, how it was to hear the story first or last. And, it was probably sort of half and half. Nobody had terribly strong feelings about it. So we'll just let Tom decide how he wants to do it. And I think he's decided he's going to tell a story first. Is that right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Go right ahead. Go for it.
Okay. Well, this story follows Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane. And so it ends with, "Look, my betrayer is at hand." And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas Iscariot, that Judas who was one of the 12, came with a crowd from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders, armed with swords and clubs. Now the betrayer had given them a sign. "The one I kiss is the man. Seize him and lead him away securely." And immediately going right up to him, he kissed him. And he said, "Rabbi." And they seize him. But one of those who was standing by struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus answered and said to them, "Have you come out as against a bandit, an insurrectionist, with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I was with you, teaching in the temple, and you did not arrest me. But this is happening in order that the scriptures might be fulfilled." And forsaking him, they all fled. There was a young man who was following him, who was clothed only in a linen garment, and they seized him. But leaving the linen garment, he ran away naked.
Okay, thanks, Tom. These stories get sort of harder and harder as we get further into the narrative, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, towards the end of this one, Jesus, it's his response to the disciples who want him to resist, I guess. But he says something about, and this is happening in order to fulfill the scriptures. Or the prophecy, I can't remember which word you used there.
Prophecy, this is the scriptures.
The scriptures, yeah. So a prophecy from the scriptures. What would he have been referencing? What was he talking about there?
Well, there aren't any scriptures that prophesy, that foretell the arrest and condemnation and death of the Messiah. But there is one sense in which this is a reference to prophecies, and they're primarily Jesus prophecies. So the third passion prophecy, 10:33 and 34, says that the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. And so that same word in Greek, paradidomi, is used here to describe Judas, the betrayer, the hander over, man. It's also his prophecy that they would all run away as they were on the way to Gethsemane. Jesus says, "You will all flee. You'll all be scattered. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered." So Jesus prophesies this. He also says that Peter will deny him. That's another prophecy. Well, these prophecies are then signs that both Jesus is truly a prophet who foresees what's going to happen in the future, and that this is the will of God. The fulfillment of prophecy carries with it the sense that God is involved. So in this case, it means that this fulfillment of the prophecy is will of God.
It also is a reason that Jesus would make the decision not to resist. It's not that he is afraid or sort of doesn't have the chutzpah to do that. It's that he is following what he understands is divine will.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so the two main characters in this piece of the story were named. Well, I guess there's more than two, but the ones that come to my mind are Jesus and Judas. It's this powerful, quintessential experience of betrayal with a kiss. What was Judas's motive? Why would he turn against his teacher like this?
The implication of is that Judas was associated with the insurrection and with those who initiated the insurrections against the Romans, that he was a zealot who was passionately committed to a violent revolution. And so Jesus, now acting as Messiah, rather than organizing an army and carrying out a coup of throwing out the Romans, instead, what Jesus does is to accept arrest and to pursue a policy of nonviolent resistance to the policies of the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. So Jesus is acting here as the Messiah of peace, as one who is different than the expectations of the Messiah, as one who would organize an army like David and carry out warfare against Israel's enemies.
Yeah. Yeah, well, his followers didn't necessarily get that memo, because one of them struck the slave of the high priest, clearly ready to cause harm and to mount an resistance. Do we know who that was?
Well, the implication is that it's one of the disciples. They were the only ones who were there, other than this crowd. So the implication is it's one of the disciples. Later stories, he's named as Peter, but that is not the case here. In Mark, it's simply one of those standing by. And so the specific identity of who it is not made clear in Mark's story.
Okay. So the two responses we get is one of them strikes, does this violent action. It doesn't go anywhere with that because Jesus stops him, and then everybody runs away. What was that about? Why they all run away? I thought they were sworn, followers of Jesus and going to stay with him to the death. Well, I think they said that in the garden.
They did.
Yeah.
They said, even if we must die with you,
Yeah.
I will never deny you. They all said the same thing.
Yeah, and that was like just hours before, wasn't it?
Right. Yep.
So what happened?
Well, what happened was that they faced the reality of being arrested and crucified. And so the flight of the disciples is, on the one hand, an act of self-protection. On the other hand, it's a response of rejection of Jesus' way. And it's just an instinctive thing that happened for them that he had foreseen. It was how they would respond, that they would all run away. But the implication is that they were, as anybody can understand, they were afraid and they ran away. On the other hand, it is a sign that they were not willing to follow Jesus on his way of nonviolent resistance and of being arrested and killed.
And then this story ends with this interesting little detail. I actually have taught this story in a number of times in jail and prison, and nobody really is, even though it's fairly familiar. I think most people have heard about the betrayal and the kiss, but nobody, I don't think, ever remembered about this young man who ran away naked. It's a very interesting detail. Why do you think Mark included that particular detail? Or well, maybe it was quite memorable. I don't know, but why? What's the significance?
It was very memorable, but Matthew and Luke, for example, don't include this note. So it is a distinctive element in Mark's story, and the specific connections of how this story got transmitted. There's been speculation that this was Mark's telling about what he did. I don't hear any connection with the storyteller in this. It is rather a remembrance of the degree of terror and the degree of shame that was associated with running away.
Yeah.
So running away naked was the ultimate shame for a warrior. So at the time of the exile, for example, the warriors of the army, the Babylonians cut off their skirts at the waist so that they then were going on their march to Babylon naked, exposed. And there was no greater shame for a man than this kind of sign of defeat and subjugation, than to be required. It was humiliating. And that's the association of this, is that the running away was associated with the shame of running away naked.
Right. Yeah. Well, you've already talked quite a bit about how this story connects with peace, in terms of Jesus being a Messiah of peace, and he wasn't willing to kill people in order to further his goals, which is certainly something that's been forgotten, was forgotten at some point by the Christian church, who were certainly, like during the Crusades, very willing to kill people for what they consider to be their mission, but Jesus wasn't. So anyway, are there other connections that you would want to make between this story and issues of justice in today's world?
Well, the issue that faces those who are going to be advocates of the kingdom of God and followers of Jesus is present in this story. The issue is violence or nonviolence. The church has been implicated in horrific centuries of violence. First of all, against other Christians, the Protestants and the Catholics, killing each other in the aftermath of the Reformation. A third of the population of Europe was killed in the 30 Years' War. And so there has been...
Well, that wasn't first of all. I think first of all, it was against the Muslims.
There were the Crusades.
The Crusades that I
were-
was thinking
right.
about. Yeah,
Right. So,
bloody.
so what has happened is that the central theme of this story of God's kingdom being established by nonviolent resistance has been lost in the development of the tradition.
Yeah.
But Mark and the evangelists are very clear that that was Jesus' way, that he was distinctive among the messiahs of Israel as one who was an advocate and a practitioner of nonviolence. So the most important thing, I think, to recognize in this story is that Jesus is a Messiah of reconciliation, of peace, of nonviolence. So that's at the core of the impact of this story.
Yeah, right. Okay, thanks, Tom. I don't know if this came through or not, but while we've been talking, the siren went off in our community. So if you happen to hear that siren, just think of that as that ominous tone that accompanies this story, actually, about the things that Jesus prophesied to his disciples are now beginning to come true, are happening, just as he said they would. And with that, I think we'll sign off and say goodbye for this week.
Have a good week. And maybe this, during Lent, that this is a time to meditate on this most central story that was told from the beginning. It's the one story, the long story that is common to all four Gospels. So this is at the core of the Gospel.